How ya all, Wyrm here. You most likely recognise the scene unfolding before you. The Battle of Carteneau, as shown in the Realm Reborn trailer, marks an important moment for all players. For some, it marked the end of a story. For others, it marked the beginning of one. But for all players, it was our introduction to the story of Final Fantasy XIV as it would now and always be. I personally rewatch this trailer all the time, as it fills me with a sense of nostalgia and good memories of early years playing the game. As iconic and important as this battle was, when it was first shown, players were left with so many questions about it. These questions would slowly be answered over the next few years, with some of the last answers coming just recently. In this video, we explore the Battle of Carteneau, and provide the answers to all those questions and how they came to be. Let's begin. The Battle of Carteneau was sparked by the death of the Legatus of the 14th Guardian Legion, Nael van Darnus. We found out later that Nael was in fact his younger sister Ulia Darnus, who took up her brother's identity when he died years before the events of Final Fantasy XIV. Nael was killed by adventurers when she tried to enact her plans, but the damage had already been done, as she succeeded in drawing down Bahamut. As it began drawing closer to Eorzea, estimates had it making landfall in the Carteneau Plains, which lay between the borders of Mordona and Thanalan. With the loss of their Legatus, the 7th Legion began to amass in full force on the Carteneau Plains. Information about the Legion's movements actually came from Gaius van Baelsar, Legatus of the 14th Legion, who stated that the men and women of the 7th had become fanatical and believed that Nael yet lived. Even though you see Gaius on his airship nearby, neither he or the 14th got involved, which is the right call for them as they avoided what was to come. In response to the threat of Bahamut and the 7th Legion massing its forces on the plains, the Eorzean Alliance amassed forces of its own, consisting primarily of the Grand Companies, adventurers, and other allied parties. It is these two sides that are fighting on the Carteneau Plains, as Bahamut drew dangerously close above them. The Eorzean Alliance's duty was to hold and defeat the 7th Legion, while another plan was actioned behind them to deal with Bahamut. Right after Nael's death and the realization that Bahamut would fall, Louisoix Levieur and his organization, the Circle of Knowing, came to the Eorzean Alliance with a plan to invoke the 12 in a summoning, the goal to repel Bahamut into the heavens once more and seal it away. Louisoix's plan was simple. Through prayer towards the 12 across Eorzea at the same moment, combined with no small amount of aether, they would be able to perform the summoning. To aid in that endeavour, Louisoix travelled across Eorzea and marked places of worship with the symbols of the 12. These, along with the Eorzean Alliance's efforts of leading their peoples in compliant prayer, was what was needed to make the plan possible, in cooperation with key Archon members. The battle on the plains continued to rage with no victor in sight. Just then, the fighting was stopped by a large impact between the two sides. Bahamut began to fracture and come apart, and to everyone's horror, a colossal dragon emerged. One of Bahamut's primary purposes was to keep the Elder Primal Bahamut sealed away. Now free, he let his rage be felt across Eorzea and to the armies fighting below, who they themselves began to flee, for none among their ranks could stand before the Primal. Just as it seemed that Bahamut's rage would consume them all, Louisoix and the Circle of Knowing completed their preparations. At places of worship to the patron gods of the 12, massive columns of light erupted into the sky. The summoning of the 12 had begun. This massive release of aether took form as 12 pillars, which then rushed forth and pierced Bahamut from all sides, which began constructing a prison around him to seal him away. Now, we all know what happened next when Bahamut broke free and the summoning appeared to fail, but you may be surprised to hear that Louisoix actually came very close to sealing him. The summoning required massive amounts of aether, and the main source of it was the land itself. Louisoix knew he couldn't draw forth too much aether or risk harming the world itself, not only due to the loss of that much aether, But because if he channeled too much into this summoning, the aftermath would have likely destroyed all of Eorzea and greatly harmed the planet. For that reason, Louisoix couldn't channel everything into this spell, and as a result, Bahamut was able to free himself before it took full effect, his rage and power overwhelming the entire process. Let's not forget, the plan was to reseal Bahamut, the celestial body, not a raging elder primal that would fight back with the desperation of a cornered beast. The summoning of the 12 had been one of the great lore debates of Final Fantasy XIV ever since the launch of A Realm Reborn. Up until Endwalker, we all assumed that this summoning was the 12's power manifested. However, the events of the new Alliance raid in patch 6.1 seems to have answered this question once and for all. These beings identify themselves as the 12, and in answer to our question about Carteneau, state that it was not their manifestation, but instead a primal summoning in their likeness, based on the prayers of the Eorzean people. This revelation seems to answer our last thought question about the events of the Battle of Carteneau, but this is all under the assumption that the 12 deities we met are the genuine article, but signs do seem to point to them being true. Back to Carteneau. The sealing of Bahamut failed and there was no way to try again. The side effect of the summoning meant that high levels of etheric energy permeated the entire area. Bahamut began to feed off this aether, replenishing his own power, but also channeling it into a final Terror Flare attack that would destroy Eorzea. Louisoix, in one of his last acts, used some of this energy to teleport the adventurers out of harm's way, but also through time years into the future. In the original trailer, we never got an answer to what happened next at the Carteneau Plains. However, as we ventured through the final coil of Bahamut, we got our answer. It was in those depths that we encountered the primal known as Phoenix. After it's defeated, it made its true identity known as Louisoix himself. He then filled the gaps in of what happened after he teleported the adventurers away. As Bahamut charged his attack, Louisoix had a vision of the 12 pillars that were summoned before, and quickly realised he could use the aether of the area just as Bahamut could. Combined with the still ongoing prayers from across Eorzea, Louisoix channeled them and the aether into another primal summoning, this time transforming himself into the primal Phoenix, and launched into the sky towards Bahamut. Blocking Bahamut's Terror Flare, Louisoix fought a battle of will and power against the Elder Primal. In a final push and release of everything he had, Louisoix shattered the Terror Flare before it could impact the ground, and pierced Bahamut's chest straight to the other side. This was enough to end Bahamut's threat towards Eorzea. However, as Louisoix's body dispersed, he realised that Bahamut was not fully destroyed, and the Elder Primal reached out and ensnared the mind of Louisoix, who was no longer in a position to resist his thrall. Right after these events, the remains of Bahamut and the Terror Flare he created exploded in a massive burst that destroyed the Carteneau Plains and much of the surrounding area, a calamity ushering in the new era. The story of the Battle of Carteneau doesn't end there though, for one final revelation remains. The battle itself, the means to control Bahamut and release the Elder Primal, were all pieces on a game board that the Ascians were playing all along. The Ascians used the Battle of Carteneau as part of their plan for a rejoining. The Ascians ever seek to rejoin the reflection worlds to the source, to make the world whole again, but also to reform their god, the Primal Zodiac. Not long after the Sundering, they began a long drawn out plan of rejoining these worlds to the source, and by the events of the Battle of Carteneau, there had already been 6 rejoinings, with the 7th taking place during the battle itself. In the past rejoinings, the Ascians rejoined worlds of different elemental affinities. These manifested the cataclysms the world experienced in its past, like flames and massive floods, all based on the reflection world's element that they rejoined. For the 7th rejoining, they planned to rejoin a reflection with no specific affinity. Thus they needed to take advantage of a cataclysm on the source to mask the rejoining that would take place, as they did with the others. Bahamut's fall and the Elder Primal being freed were the perfect cover for this, As Bahamut began to unleash his wrath, the rejoining took place without anybody noticing, and any signs were attributed to the aftermath of the Battle of Carteneau. That brings the story of the Battle of Carteneau to a close. Each of these revelations regarding this battle came one at a time over the years. The final one came with the 12 in patch 6.1, giving us our final answer regarding the summoning, which the people of Eorzea believed was the manifestation of the 12, but instead was a primal summoning in their likeness due to the people's prayers. Thanks for watching, everyone. This trailer and its story have a special place in my heart. I remember the first time I saw it, and how hopeful it made me for the game's future. When I saw it again during FanFest 2014, I recalled how misty-eyed I got watching it with everybody else. If you enjoyed this run through of the Battle of Carteneau, please leave a like, and if you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe to stay informed about my future videos. Thanks all, and now, as always, have a good one.